Alright, looks like a good time to get started. We're going to talk a little bit about transformations of some graphs. So when we say transformations, we're just talking about how we can take one of our basic functions, the graph of a basic function, and move it. And we can move it left, right, up, down. We can stretch it. We can flip it along the axes. What's going to happen, though, is we're going to discuss some of these separately, and then we're going to put them all together. So this first time, let's talk about vertical transformations. And when we talk about a vertical transformation, we are talking about just adding to the y value. We're just moving things either up or down. So the y value, of course, is what our normal f of x is. So all we're going to do with this, since we're just adding to our y values, we are literally just going to add things to our y values. We're going to take something like whatever our basic function is, and we're going to add some value, let's call that k, to this y value. So let's start out and let's give us an example here. Let's say we've got something like f of x is equal to like the absolute value of x. Okay, this is one of our basic shapes. This is a fairly classic shape, and if I'm coming up with a table of values for this, it's pretty easy to do. Take a look at my x and whatever this f of x is. If I were to plug in like a -3 here, the absolute value of -3 is just a +3. Absolute value of like a -2 is a 2. Absolute value of -1 is a 1. 0, absolute value of 0 is 0. And we could continue this on. And you know, as soon as we move into positive, well, these values stay positive. So absolute value of 1 is just 1, absolute value of 2 is 2. So nothing really unexpected here. Now, let's take a look at something else. Let's take a look at something else that we're going to call g of x. And this g of x is going to be this absolute value of x, but this time we're going to add to that, or actually we're going to subtract 2 from this. Let's see what happens. When I do this g of x, I'll still have my x and my g of x here, but when I plug in a -3, thinking about this is, I'm saying, okay, well, this is the absolute value of -3 minus 2. Well, absolute value of -3 is +3 minus 2. That's a 1. Just like that. So we just took this original function and subtracted 2. My original value of 3, and I subtracted 2 to get 1. Same thing's going to happen here with the -2. When I plug in a -2, well, I would have for my g of -2, that would be absolute value of -2 minus 2. That's going to be 2 minus 2, which is just 0. Oh. If I plug in a -1, well, absolute value of -1 is just 1. Minus 2 is going to be -1. If I plug in a 0, that's going to be 0 minus 2, which is -2. And now we see that this kind of still at this 0, we start to have some symmetry around that point. -1. I'm going to put a 2, I would end up with a 0 again, and so forth. So what we're going to notice when we graph this, anytime we graph these transformations, the shapes stay the same. The shapes will remain the same regardless of anything else, but they are just going to shift. And in this case, since it's vertical, I'm gonna expect this to shift, in this case, down 2 spaces. So here, with our absolute value of x, we started with -3 and 3, -2 and -2, 1, 0, 1, 2. So with something like this, I've got a graph that does this. So this right here is the graph of my f of x. This is this absolute value of x. Here with this one, I'm just shifting this whole thing down 2. It's like I grabbed this whole thing and moved it down 2. Because at -3 minus 2 is there. 0, -1, -2, 1, 2. And this pattern just continues on. So it's like I've taken this entire thing and shifted it down 2. This is our g of x, which is the same as our original f of x, this essential function here, and I've just subtracted 2. So all we've done is take this and moved it down 2 spaces. This works with all sorts of equations. This works with absolute values, this works with parabolas, this works with square roots. All of our basic shapes will, all of our basic functions will have the same sort of pattern. We just take whatever this essential relation is and we'd add or subtract a value from it. From this same sort of idea, I could, let's say I've got something like, I could even, just without even having to come up with a table, I could say, oh, let's say I've got n of x. And I'm going to do this as the absolute value of x plus 4. Here, I'm taking this basic shape, and I'm going to be taking this, and it's going to be shifted up 4 spaces. So this point right here at 0, I'm going to just move it up. Take this every value of y, and I'm going to add 4 to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I can do that everywhere. Alrighty. I think that's all we've got for the moment, so I will catch you in the next video.